My ex called my passion project a joke and walked out on me. Years later, he came back to claim half of my $2 million empire, but I had a different kind of recipe waiting for him. It all started with the smell of burnt sugar. That's the memory that's seared into my brain when I think about the beginning of the end. Not the sweet, intoxicating scent of caramelizing sweetness, but the acrid, bitter smoke of failure. I had been up for 36 hours straight, trying to perfect a new lace icing technique for a batch of wedding favor cookies. My eyes felt like they were full of sand, my back was a knotted mess of pain, and my tiny apartment kitchen looked like a flower bomb had detonated. And through the haze of exhaustion and the stench of my mistake, I heard his voice from the living room, dripping with that lazy, condescending amusement I'd grown to despise. "Still playing with your little cookies, babe." That was Mark, my boyfriend of 3 years. To the outside world, he was the perfect package. A financial analyst with a sharp suit, a sharper haircut, and a smile that could charm the pants off anyone. When we met, I was smitten. He was ambitious, driven, and he seemed to support my dreams. Seemed to. But dreams, I learned, are only acceptable to men like Mark when they remain small, manageable, and don't interfere with their dinner plans. My dream was a business I called Artful Bites. I didn't just bake cookies. I created miniature edible canvases. I could replicate a Monet in royal icing, paint a detailed family portrait on a sugar cookie, or build a 3D floral bouquet that looked too real to eat. It was my passion, my art. I had been doing it on the side while working a soul-crushing data entry job, but I'd finally saved up enough to quit and go all in. I poured every penny of my savings into it, buying professional-grade equipment that took over our small apartment. At first, Mark played the part of the supportive boyfriend. He'd kiss my flour-dusted cheek and say things like, "That's so cool, babe," before retreating to the living room to play video games for 6 hours. But as my business grew from a few Etsy orders to local markets and then to small corporate clients, his support started to curdle into something ugly. "You're really making a mess," he'd complain, gesturing to the cooling racks that covered every available surface. "My clients are coming over for drinks on Friday. Can you make sure all this stuff is gone by then?" The word stuff was delivered with a subtle sneer, as if my livelihood was just a pile of clutter he had to tolerate. He never called it a business. It was my hobby, my little project, or his personal favorite, my cookie thing. The night it all shattered was about a year into the business. I had just landed my biggest client yet. A tech startup wanted 500 cookies, each with their intricate logo perfectly rendered, for a huge launch party. The payout was more money than I had ever made in a single month at my old job. I was ecstatic, practically vibrating with a mixture of terror and excitement. I ran into the living room holding the signed contract. "Mark, you are not going to believe this," I practically screamed. "Look, I did it. This is a game changer." He didn't look up from his laptop. His fingers continued to tap away at the keyboard. "That's nice, babe," he said, his eyes still glued to a spreadsheet. I deflated. "Nice? Mark, this is huge. This could be the start of everything. I might even be able to afford a commercial kitchen space soon." He finally looked up, and the expression on his face wasn't pride. It was a blank, almost pitying look. He sighed, closed his laptop, and gave me his full, patronizing attention. "Look, honey," he began, using that tone he used when he was about to explain something complicated to a child. "It's great that you're having fun, and it's cute that you're making some extra cash. But let's be real, it's a joke." The word hung in the air between us, heavy and foul. A joke?" I whispered. "Yeah, I mean, come on, it's cookies. You're playing with frosting in the kitchen. I'm out there building a real career, managing multi-million-dollar portfolios, and you're making snacks." He gestured around the apartment. "This isn't a business, it's a mess. And frankly, it's a little embarrassing when my friends ask what my girlfriend does for a living." Every ounce of joy, every bit of pride I had felt just moments before, curdled into pure, cold rage. I had been surviving on 4 hours of sleep a night. I had calluses on my hands from piping bags and burns on my arms from oven racks. I had poured my heart, my soul, and my entire life savings into this joke. And he thought it was embarrassing. "Get out," I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. He actually laughed. "What? Don't be so dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic," I said, my voice rising with every word. "I am building something that is mine, and I am doing it without a single ounce of real support from you. All you do is complain and belittle me. So if my business is such a joke, then get out of my comedy club. Get out." The smile fell from his face. He saw I was serious. He stood up, grabbing his jacket. "Fine," he spat. "Don't come crying to me in a few months when you're broke and this little fantasy of yours has completely failed. You'll see what a joke it is then." He slammed the door behind him, leaving me alone in the silence, surrounded by the tools of my ridiculous, embarrassing dream. I sank to the floor, the contract still clutched in my hand, and for the first time, I let myself truly sob, not from exhaustion, but from the searing pain of his betrayal. Little did I know, the real joke hadn't even begun. His words echoed in my head for weeks. Joke, fantasy, failure. They became the fuel. Every time my wrist ached from piping, I heard his laugh. Every time I had to haggle with a supplier, I saw his condescending smirk. I used his dismissal of me to build an empire out of spite and sugar. The tech startup's order was flawless. It led to another, then another. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. Within 6 months, I moved out of my apartment kitchen and into a small commercial space. The rent was terrifying, but the freedom was intoxicating. I hired my first employee, a young pastry school graduate named Chloe, who shared my passion for intricate detail. 2 years passed in a blur of flour, butter, and success. Artful Bites was no longer a cookie thing. We were a brand. We were featured in Forbes under a 30 under 30 list for artisanal food entrepreneurs. We had a 6-month waiting list for custom orders and a lucrative partnership with a chain of high-end coffee shops. The small commercial space became a large, bustling bakery with a storefront and a team of 10. I had done it. I had built a real, tangible, successful business, and I had done it all without him. I hadn't heard a word from Mark since the day he walked out. I'd blocked his number, deleted his photos, and surgically removed him from my life. I was happy. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, the bell above the bakery door chimed. I was in the back, approving a new packaging design, when Chloe called out, "Sarah, someone's here to see you." I walked out, wiping my hands on my apron, a smile ready for a client or a supplier. And then I saw him. It was Mark. He was standing in the middle of my beautiful, sunlit bakery, looking completely out of place in his tailored suit. He looked older, a little tired around the eyes. But it was him. For a second, the air left my lungs. It felt like a ghost had just walked into my new life. He was staring around at the gleaming display cases filled with my creations, at the happy chatter of my employees, at the customers lining up. His mouth was slightly agape. "Sarah," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. "Wow, just wow." I crossed my arms, a reflex. "What do you want, Mark?" He took a step forward, his eyes finally landing on me. "I know I have no right to be here," he said, holding up his hands in a gesture of surrender. I saw the article in Forbes. I couldn't believe it. I had to see it for myself. What you've built here, it's incredible." He looked genuinely impressed, and despite myself, a traitorous little flicker of pride ignited in my chest. This was the validation I had craved from him all those years ago. "I was an idiot, Sarah," he continued, his voice thick with what sounded like regret. "A complete, arrogant fool. What I said to you, it was the biggest mistake of my life. There hasn't been a day that's gone by that I don't regret it. I was jealous. My own career had stalled, and I saw you soaring, and I tried to tear you down. It was unforgivable." He laid it all out, a perfectly crafted apology that hit every single one of my old wounds. He asked for nothing, just to tell me he was sorry. We ended up getting coffee at the shop next door. He told me he'd lost his high-flying job a year ago and was now working a less glamorous role at a smaller firm. He painted a picture of a man humbled by life, a man who finally understood his own failings. Against my better judgment, I started to soften. We met for coffee again later that week, and then dinner. He was charming, attentive, and endlessly complimentary about my business. He called it my empire. He called me a visionary. He was everything I had once wished he would be. A month after he reappeared, the unthinkable happened. I received an email with the subject line, "Acquisition Inquiry, Artful Bites." It was from one of the largest gourmet food conglomerates in the country. They had been watching my brand's growth, and they wanted to buy it. They wanted my recipes, my brand name, my operational model. They flew me out to their headquarters. It was a whirlwind of meetings with executives in slick boardrooms. They talked about national distribution, about taking my little cookie concept to a global scale. And then they made the offer. $2 million. I felt like I was going to pass out. $2 million for my joke, for my little hobby. I flew home in a daze, the signed letter of intent feeling impossibly heavy in my bag. I was so overwhelmed with emotion, I couldn't think straight. The first person I wanted to tell, the only person who could possibly understand the seismic shift that was happening in my life, was Mark. We were supposed to meet for dinner that night. I got to the restaurant early, my leg bouncing under the table with nervous energy. When he walked in, I couldn't contain it any longer. "Mark, you are not going to believe what just happened," I said, my voice trembling with excitement as he sat down. I told him everything, the email, the flight, the meetings, and finally the number. "They're buying my company," I finished, my eyes welling up with tears of pure shock and joy. $2 million. I expected him to be happy for me, to celebrate, to be as stunned as I was. But a strange look crossed his face. He didn't smile, not at first. He just stared at me, his eyes wide. Then a slow, predatory grin spread across his lips, a look I had never seen before. He reached across the table and took my hand. His voice was a low, triumphant whisper. "That's incredible, babe. Absolutely incredible," he said, squeezing my hand tightly. "We're going to be so rich." The word "we" hit me like a splash of ice water. "We?" I pulled my hand back as if I'd been burned. "What do you mean, we?" His grin didn't falter. It only widened, becoming something sharp and unsettling. "Well, I mean us. You and me. This is our big break. We can finally get that house we used to talk about, travel the world. We did it, Sarah." My head was spinning. Did what? "Mark, I don't understand. This is my company, Artful Bites. I built it. You have nothing to do with it." The words came out more defensively than I intended, but a cold dread was starting to seep into my bones, chilling the warmth of my earlier excitement. He chuckled, a low, condescending sound that instantly transported me back to our cramped apartment kitchen and the smell of burnt sugar. "Oh, Sarah, don't be naive. You really think you did this all on your own?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Who do you think gave you the idea to focus on corporate clients? Remember that night I was complaining about the terrible gift baskets my old firm used to send out? I planted that seed. Who pushed you to get a real website instead of just relying on Etsy? That was me. I gave you the business advice you needed to turn your little hobby into, well, this." I stared at him, my mouth agape. It was a complete and utter fabrication. He was twisting vague, throwaway comments from years ago, conversations where he was mostly complaining about his own life and reframing them as pivotal moments of business mentorship. He'd never pushed me to do anything but clear my baking supplies off the dining table. "That's insane," I finally managed to say. "You called my business a joke. You told me it was embarrassing. You walked out on me because you thought I was going to fail." "Tough love, babe," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "I knew you had it in you, but you were unfocused. I had to give you a push, something to prove. It was a strategy. And look, it worked perfectly. You should be thanking me." He sat back, looking incredibly pleased with his own twisted logic. The sincerity he had shown over the last month, the apologies, the regret, it was all gone. In its place was the same arrogant, entitled man I had kicked out of my apartment. Only now he had a dollar sign in his eyes, a $2 million sign. The rest of the dinner was a nightmare. I was too stunned to leave. I just sat there as he mapped out our future. He talked about investments he would make with our money, about the car he was going to buy. He didn't ask me a single question about my own plans or feelings. He just assumed. He assumed that because he'd wormed his way back into my life a few weeks before my big break, he was entitled to half of it. The man who had called my dream a joke was now planning a victory lap on my finish line. When I finally got home, I felt physically ill. The euphoria of the day had been poisoned, replaced by a profound sense of violation. He had played me. His reappearance wasn't a coincidence. The Forbes article wasn't just a catalyst for an apology. It was a dinner bell. He saw my success and came running back, not for me, but for what I had. The next morning, I did the only thing I could. I sent him a text. "Mark, last night was unacceptable. You have no claim to my business or the money from the acquisition. What you're trying to do is disgusting. Don't ever contact me again." I blocked his number before he could reply. I felt a sense of relief, a finality. It was over. I could go back to focusing on the acquisition, on the future of my company, on my team. I thought that would be the end of it. How wrong I was. About a week later, I was at the bakery, finalizing paperwork with my lawyer for the acquisition, which was set to close in a month. My receptionist buzzed me. "Sarah, there's a courier here with a delivery for you. It looks official." A man in a uniform handed me a thick manila envelope. I signed for it, my brow furrowed. I wasn't expecting any legal documents. I sat down at my desk and tore it open. Inside was a stack of papers, dense with legal jargon. But I didn't need to read the fine print. The words on the very first page jumped out at me, bold and undeniable. It was a lawsuit. The plaintiff was Mark Peterson. The defendant was me, Sarah Jenkins, and Artful Bites, LLC. I scanned the document, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was suing me. He was suing me for 50% of the company's sale price, $1 million. The claim was breathtaking in its audacity. It stated that he was an early-stage conceptual partner, that he had provided foundational business strategy and seed capital, and that we had a verbal partnership agreement. Seed capital? He once paid for a $5 bag of flour because I didn't have cash on me at the farmer's market. Foundational strategy? He told me my logo looked homemade. This was a work of pure fiction, a legal document built on a foundation of lies. I thought it was a bluff, a pathetic, desperate attempt to intimidate me. But then I flipped to the last page of the attached exhibits. My blood ran cold. It was a grainy photograph, a selfie of me and him from years ago, on the day I officially registered my business name. We were in our old apartment, and I was holding up the registration certificate, beaming. And on the back of the certificate, in my own bubbly handwriting, were a few scribbled words that I had long forgotten ever writing. He must have taken a picture of it back then, saving it for a rainy day. And now the storm had arrived. Underneath my signature, it read, "The first step for our future, S&M forever." That stupid lovesick doodle. S&M forever, Sarah and Mark. At the time, it felt romantic, a testament to what I thought was our shared future. Now, twisted by his greed, it looked like a smoking gun. His lawyers were framing it as evidence of our partnership, a concrete link between our relationship and the founding of my business. It was circumstantial, ridiculous, but combined with his fabricated stories, It was just enough to make my lawyer's face tighten with concern. "This is a nuisance suit, Sarah," my lawyer, David, told me, his voice grim, "but it's a dangerous one. He's not trying to win in court. He's trying to delay the acquisition. The conglomerate has a clause in the agreement about pending litigation. If we can't get this resolved before the closing date, they could pull the offer. He knows that. He's trying to force you into a settlement." The rage I felt was so potent it was almost blinding. Mark wasn't just trying to steal from me. He was trying to sabotage the single greatest achievement of my life out of pure spite and greed. He was holding my dream hostage. His opening settlement offer was as obscene as his lawsuit, $750,000. "Pay me or nobody gets anything," was the unspoken threat. For a week, I was paralyzed. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The joy of the acquisition was gone, replaced by the bitter taste of legal warfare. David advised me to consider settling. He said fighting it could take years and hundreds of thousands in legal fees, with no guarantee of winning, and I'd lose the acquisition for sure. It felt like letting him win, like validating his disgusting claim that he had any part in my success. I was about to give in to write a check that would make me sick to my stomach just to make him go away. But then, as I was packing up some old personal items from my office, I found it. It was a small, dusty box labeled Memories. Inside were old birthday cards, concert ticket stubs, and a stack of photos. And tucked in the back was an old external hard drive, one I hadn't used since before I started Artful Bites. It was the one I used to back up everything from our old shared computer. On a whim, driven by a desperate fading glimmer of hope, I plugged it in. It whirred to life, and I started digging through old folders. Most of it was junk college papers, downloaded music, photos. But then I found a folder named Mark Work Stuff. He was always paranoid about losing his work and had backed up his entire work drive onto my hard drive once. And inside that folder, I found a subfolder labeled Chat Logs. My heart stopped. Our old apartment had a desktop computer we both used. We were constantly sending each other messages on an old instant messaging program, even when we were in the same room. I clicked on a log dated the week I registered my business. I started reading, and there it was, in black and white, time-stamped, irrefutable. Mark. Seriously, you spent $75 on that business registration thing for a cookie hobby? Me. It's not a hobby. It's going to be a real business, you'll see. Mark. Lowell. Okay, whatever you say, babe. Just make sure you don't spend our vacation money on sprinkles. I swear if this little cookie thing gets in the way of the Mexico trip, I'm going to be pissed. Me. It won't. This is my money, from my savings. I wouldn't ask you for a dime. Mark. Good, because you're not getting one. I'm not investing in a joke. My money goes into the stock market, not a cookie jar. I kept scrolling. It was all there. Page after page of him belittling my efforts, calling my business a waste of time, complaining about the cost of ingredients that I bought with my own money, and explicitly stating he would never, ever financially support it. It was a perfect, detailed takedown of every single lie in his lawsuit. The foundational strategy was him telling me not to bother. The seed capital was him refusing to lend me $5 for a cab to a baking supply store. The next day, I didn't just walk into the deposition, I glided in. Mark was sitting beside his lawyer, looking smug and confident. He winked at me when I sat down. My lawyer began the questioning, letting Mark spin his web of lies, building himself up as the brilliant puppet master behind my success. He talked about his mentorship, his invaluable advice. I just watched, my face a perfect mask of calm. Then David leaned forward. Mr. Peterson, you claim you were a conceptual partner from the very beginning, that you considered Artful Bites a joint venture, correct? Absolutely, Mark said, puffing out his chest. It was our baby. And you state you provided seed capital? Of course. I supported Sarah financially whenever she needed it. David slid a thick bound document across the table. "Then could you please explain these?" Mark opened the document. His face went from smug to confused to pale to ashen gray in the space of about 30 seconds. He was staring at hundreds of pages of his own words, his own condescending, dismissive, cruel words. His lawyer snatched the document and his own face paled as he read. I saw the exact moment he realized the game was over. "Mr. Peterson," David continued, his voice like silk-wrapped steel, "is that you on record calling my client's business a joke? Is that you refusing to invest in a cookie jar? Is this you threatening to be pissed if her little cookie thing interfered with your vacation plans?" Mark couldn't speak. He just stared at the pages, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. His lawyer cleared his throat and quietly whispered something to him. A few moments later, he stood up. "We will need to take a brief recess," he mumbled. They didn't come back. An hour later, my lawyer received an email. Mark was dropping the lawsuit, effective immediately. He would not be pursuing any claim. The acquisition closed 2 weeks later, without a hitch. The $2 million, minus taxes and legal fees, was wired into my account. It felt surreal. But the victory wasn't the money. The victory was that moment in the deposition room, watching the smug entitlement drain from Mark's face, replaced by the cold, hard reality that his lies had been exposed. He tried to tear me down when we were together, and he tried to steal from me when I succeeded. In the end, all he got was a front-row seat to my triumph, paid for with his own humiliation. He thought my business was a joke, but the real punchline was him. And I was the one who got the last laugh.